everyone, this is Debbie from Project 39 Mini Albums. Welcome back to my channel. This month I put out an opportunity to collab with me to make cards to give to nursing homes or those on the front lines of COVID-19 and thank them for their help or just let them know that we're thinking about them. So this is the process that I use to put together those cards. Here I'm going through the paper pad trying to determine which of the papers I'm going to use for what purpose. I love these beautiful hydrangeas. These are on a blue background. So I'm basically just looking to see what I'm going to use the papers for. The ones with the heavy patterns, of course, will be in a background. The ones that don't have any patterns at all I can use to put the sentiments on. This one that's got the gold foiled leaves I can actually use as cutting those leaves. This is what the paper pad looked like. It was Bless Our Home. It was a Recollections paper pad from Michaels. So some of the 12 by 12 papers you can use bits and pieces of, but not the whole thing. For instance, this tree, I'll cut that tree apart and try to use that because it's a pretty tree. And I can use some of the plain paper on the side, whether I use it to punch out or stamp a sentiment on. So I can use a lot of that paper. But for all intents and purposes, the center area right here, I can't use. I can use that. So papers like this that have the flowers on the corners, I can use the centers to stamp sentiments, and I can also use bits and pieces of the corners. And again, here with the tree, I can use the tree, and I can also stamp sentiments on the wood grain paper. And this is the border sheet. It's got a lot of gold foiling on it. And some of the pieces I can use as is, and some I'll cut down, like this one. I'll cut in half so I can have the stripes on it. And then I'll just cut all of those papers down and use them throughout the card making process. And here I've taken the cut aparts and cut them down to 3 by 4 cards. Some of them I can put a sentiment in the center. You could see how this hello fits right in there. The one with the hydrangeas on the border, I could use that. It's going to take a little bit of creative cropping to do. There's this one with the flower wreath, the oval shaped wreath. I could stamp something on there, and I love this hydrangea, just flower. That'll be pretty. The rest of these journaling cards I really can maybe cut little bits and pieces out, but for all intents and purposes they're not going to work for me. Okay, and now here I'm going to make the sentiments. I've cut some paper, some as plain paper, some came from the paper pad. And I'm just going to stamp any sentiment that I think is going to work. I'm going to use all different shapes and forms, mostly rectangles and squares just because it's easier. But I also did die cut some circles and different shapes, and I will stamp sentiments on that as well. Here I used a circle punch and cut out circles and stamped just because right in the center. Some I stamped just on the plain paper that the leaf is right in an inopportune area, so I may or may not use that. And this is my collection of sentiments, die cuts, punches, those leaves I cut out. So all of these things I've put together. I may have to add to it, but at least I have a good start once I go to put all of my cards together. And I save these. You know, if I don't use it for this card kit, I will save it. The colors may or may not work for something in the future. Alright, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. So now what I'm going to do is take some of those that I've deemed will be good as backgrounds. I've also taken some plain cardstock from my stash and cut them down. So the card size that I'm going to use, because I have packages of it with envelopes, is 5.5 by 4. So I'm going to cut for the first layer 5 5/16 by 3 13/16. I'm only leaving 3/16 of a border around the entire card. They're smaller cards. If they were bigger, I'd probably leave 1/4 of an inch border. So I'm going to be cutting down all of the things that I will use as a base or a background or half of the card. So obviously this is fast motion. There are some pieces of paper where I can't use the entire page, so I'm cutting down what I can. I can double up on these because this paper trimmer is fabulous, and get rid of the ones that have the writing on it. And I will do this until I get all of my card bases cut, and you're going to get different sizes of paper left over. So I make different stacks of it. The first base, the second layer, which is 5 1/8 by 3 5/8, and then whatever little pieces are left over after that. And now I'm ready to start assembling my cards. All right, so I'm going to take from my base of cards, and you can see I've also die cut some out of a grayish blue, and some I've cut out of gold foiling to match with the gold foiling on the card. There's the wood grain paper, there's the hydrangeas, which are really pretty, but I almost hate to use as one of the card bases. And the gold foiling is pretty, but you're going to have to be careful how you use it. So let me grab one of the pieces out of my bases and show you how we're going to do it. So here's a card base, and I put the base paper on the card base. Sorry, hope that it's not too confusing. And then I put another paper on top of it, and see, that looks really nice together. The colors all match. And then you try to figure out what will go with that. So this one may, may or may not look good on it. You just have to play around with it, remembering that you'll have other features on the card to pull it all together. So let's go with a couple of different combinations. So this one has the blue with the dotted flowers, and there's the beige and the blue dotted flowers. So I'm going to continue putting together some cards on the bases and just come up with some nice designs. Like that one looks pretty good. Maybe there needs to be a little more separation. So this is where I take some from the border strips and figure out where it looks best. I sort of go by the rule of thirds. You don't want anything usually right in the middle, in my mind. So I will ink up the edges so there's a little more delineation between the two. And I'll go ahead and put some glue on it, and there's my first card base. So I will put the glue on, and then I'll take it over to my paper trimmer, which is to my left, and trim off that piece, and maybe trim off a little bit, just to make sure everything looks nice and consistent. And I will continue and go through the rest of the ones that I have the two pieces together. So again, this is the one with the beige and the blue dotted flowers. It's a little washed out, but look, you take this one darker piece, which is the same pattern, by the way, and that really makes it pop. So I'm going to go with that, inking up the edges because the edges are a little white showing, and I'm not nuts about that. So I'll go ahead and put glue on and then trim it all down. All right, now I want to show you another design. So I've taken the border strip, and there wasn't as much left because I used it on a couple other pieces. So I just cut it in half and went from the bottom to the middle and then the top to the middle. And you cover up that area that doesn't have anything with the sentiment. So I put the hello there to see how it looks. And I'm just going to play around with a couple of different ideas. I had this die cut. Can I put the hello on top of it? I don't know that that looks that great. So I might go back to the hello and do it without the border. So anyhow, just play around and try to come up with some designs that are pleasing to the eyes. If you've been making a lot of cards, you have card sketches in your mind that work. And even if you use the same card sketch on 100 cards, they're going to go out to 100 different people, so that's okay. I mean, the cards are all going to look nice in the end. This one, I wasn't nuts about the border strip, so I used some string, and I really liked how that looked with the wood. So one of the things I realized as I'm doing this is, so I've got this gold border strip, and because the outside of the card has the blue, the gold foiling just doesn't seem to go with it. So either I have the ones with the gold foiling or the ones without. And this is better, even though it's brown and everything's got blue. But I think that piece looks much better on this card because of the same design on the bottom. Again, this is, playing around. I tried this one with a little of the gold foiling on the leaves. No, just doesn't do it. Thank goodness I have a lot of this design because that seems to go with everything and breaks up the two patterns enough that it works. But I decided instead of that one, how about if I take a sentiment, which I've already put on a piece, and pull that out and see how we do with that. So I continue in this fashion until I've used up all of my paper. And then at the end, here are all of the scraps I have left. I have two piles. First, I've got the little pieces that I'm going to fussy cut a little further. There's the part of the hydrangea blossom that I've just sort of cut out around it, and I'll take a small scissors and fussy cut a little bit more detailed. And then there's this one where you can cut that little flower out and there's leaves to go with it. That makes a nice element once you're done. And then I've got all these scraps, and I take my nifty flag banner punch and just start punching away. I go crazy and cut flags out of all the rest of this paper. Here I'm making sure the orientation is good. Of course, with the blue it doesn't matter. Just rip off the rest and use the punch and get a couple more. And there we go. And I'm going to go through this whole pile. I'm going to put that in because that's a little bit thinner. Again, double checking with the orientation. And I am going to make banner flags, I don't know what you call them, out of the rest of this pile of papers. Alright, and after I've cut all the flags, I'm going to show you how I finished up my cards. So here's a finished card. It is got the little flags inside. I'll show you a little bit later. So I've got the sentiment on a border. That was a die cut scalloped edge circle. The hello is just on a square border. This one's on a brown one. I trimmed the edges. I just darkened the edges here with some distress ink because I didn't have borders for everything. I went through and put some Nouveau drops on the ones that I think it helped with the design. I might have got a little crazy with the Nouveau drops. Here I put one of the fussy cut hydrangea blossoms, little metal embellishments on the corner, and that's that 3x4 journaling card that came out pretty nice. So I've gone through all the cards, and then take a look at the inside. I've put flags on the inside of all of the cards. I try to match the colors that I put on with the card fronts. Doesn't always work perfectly. Sometimes I put 3, sometimes I put 5. Mostly it's 3 in all 3 different lengths because I think that looks much better. And now what I have to do is go through all the cards and write something. The ones that are going to go to a nursing home, I'm going to put a note that just says, I know you haven't had visitors lately, but that'll be over soon, or we're just thinking of you. Just something thoughtful that they know they're not in this alone. I'll separate the ones that are thank you cards. Some I'll keep with me in my purse, and if I go into a store and get the name of somebody, then I'll go out in the parking lot, put their name on the card, and drop it off to the manager before I leave that parking lot. Now I wanted to point out the card bases. Some are white and some are off-white. I actually use the white if the backgrounds were white and the layers were white, but I use the off-white or beige cardstock I had because I have a lot of that. This is a different design. I love the hydrangeas and I didn't want them to be a background, so I cut out some layers and put some layers here. Now here I did use it as a background, but sort of called attention to it with that little fussy cut blossom. There's that one that's got the thinking of you. Probably could put some Nouveau drops, but I didn't know where I'd put it in this one, and I just decided to leave that alone. You saw that card design. So I'm just showing you a couple of designs. That's one where I just cut the corner of the paper and simply put an sentiment on it. Here's the tree with a wood background and hello. Same thing, that's the smaller tree, but it just came out to be a nice little card. Of course, that's taking some border strips, putting them down on the paper and cutting that. I did a couple using up a lot of the scraps that way. And really, it's a simple card, but it looks pretty cool. There's the 3x4 cut apart. It said grow on it. I covered that up with thank you, put a couple of Nouveau drops on the side, and it looks good. That's just a nice card. It's simple, but it's pretty. Thank you very much for watching this video. It just is my method of how to use 12x12 paper pads and make some cards. The object of this is so I can get some cards made and share with nursing homes and have thank you cards to give to those that are really helping us out in these crazy days of COVID-19. If you have any questions, leave it in the description box. And if you'd like to join along, please do. All you have to do is make 1 card or 2 cards or 10 cards or 100 cards and give them out to someone who could use just a little pick-me-up in these crazy times. So once again, thank you so much for joining. Have a great day.